I must begin with an apology. I am here to pay my tribute to great Malayalam poets Vallathol and Akkitam, and I cannot speak their language. The best way to pay tribute to a poet is to say something about him or her in their language. But please excuse me. I don't know Malayalam, although I can understand a bit. I have read Vallathol, Kumaranashan or Akkitam only in Hindi translation. That's my language. Again, I am sorry that I cannot use my language here. I know that many of you may not follow Hindi properly. So I am sorry on two counts. I cannot speak Malayalam at all, and I am not using my mother language, that is Hindi. Instead, I have to use an alien language, that is English. So please forgive me for this. Respected Director of Vallathol Vidyapith, P.V. Narayanan ji, M.K. Raghav Warrior, Professor Thomas Matthew, Shri Prabha Verma ji, our favorite poet, Arasu ji, Vasudev ji, Narayana ji, all the family members of Akkitam and Vallathol, and ladies and gentlemen, for me, coming to this place is like a pilgrimage. For me, the very land of Kerala is a holy place. I have some of the great and my favorite poets and writers from this land. I have been to Kumaranashan's place. I have also been to Takshi's place. They all are my favorite writers. And Vallathol, Akkitam, M.T. Vasudevan Nair, it's their land where I find myself today paying my homage to these great writers and poets. So for me, this is a pilgrimage. I may use in between some lines from Akkitam in Hindi because my acquaintance with Akkitam is mainly through Hindi, through translations done by Arasu ji and Mr. Singh. They are excellent translations, and also I have the pleasure of looking at the coffee table book in English. I think except Rabindranath Tagore, no other Indian poet perhaps has the honor of having such a pictorial autobiographical book in any language. It's a wonderful production. So please bear with me if I use some lines of Akkitam's poems in translation, that is in Hindi. छिद्रित हीर रत्नों के भीतर से मैं गुजर सका भाग्यवश ही, क्योंकि मैं बस एक धागा मात्र था. If I happen to pass through the diamond and jewel beads, it was just a chance and it was my good luck. Otherwise, I was just an ordinary piece of thread. It's the same feeling that I have today. If I could read Akkitam or Vallatol or Kumaran Ashan, it's my good fortune only, my good luck. Otherwise, I am just an ordinary mortal, just an ordinary thread. But this ordinary thread had the privilege of and the pleasure of passing through the beads, the precious beads like diamonds and jewels. As M.T. Vasudevan Nair had said, I have been watching Nila Nadi, and I have been watching the Nila Nadi of poetry of Akkitam with great curiosity and also with great devotion. This is how he pays his tribute to Akkitam. I too have been watching, not watching exactly. I have been immersed in the great river of poetry of the Nila Nadi of Akkitam. And I was simply mesmerized. There must be enchanting magic about his verses in the original Malayalam. I don't have access to that. But whatever little I have read in the Hindi translation, reading him, I was mesmerized. He is a very different kind of poet. In the 20th century, after Rabindranath, the Indian poetry underwent a big change. Most of the Indian poets, they were drawn towards the contemporary reality, this mundane world. They celebrated this life. They wrote mainly about this life in my language too. And they created great poetry. While reading Akkitam, I find that Akkitam is strikingly different from all others. He is a deeply religious poet. He has a cosmic vision, and in his poetry, the real and whatever is there beyond the real get admixed, they get together and create a new whole of poetry. This is the first thing I found while reading Akkitam. Many of his poems draw upon the Indian myths, Purana, the Vedas, and particularly Srimad Bhagavad. As you all know, and I don't have to repeat it, that Akitam was a great reader and interpreter of the Vedas, Srimad Bhagavad, and the Upanishads. He was deeply rooted in this Indian philosophical and religious tradition. While reading this and finding that he is primarily a deeply religious poet, I was assailed by a question. It was a difficult question for me to answer. Why should I like someone who is deeply religious if I am not religious? But why do I like Tulsidas, the great Tulsidas? Akitam has mentioned Tulsidas in his writings, in his prose writings also, and also in one of his poems with adoration. Why do I like Kabir? Why do I like all those religious poets? It's because, as Akitam says, that in order to find whatever is Sanatana, this is the word he is using, Sanatana, the eternal, the continual. You don't have to go beyond this world. You find it here in everything, even in a blade of grass, even in the cloud of the earth. And it is this that takes you to the eternal, the Sanatana. Again, it was a new thing, because poetry is condemned to be about this world. Poetry can never be possible without a close reference to this world. The language itself forces a poet to stay tied to the earth. So, Akitam, though he is a deeply religious poet, having a cosmic vision, drawing profusely on the Vedic tradition, he is basically a poet of this life. And he celebrates this life in all its colors. When we read his poems, we come across several very, very racy images. For example, some of the images that have remained stuck in my memory are these: wiping the glass of my specs, or putting a gamcha on my shoulder. I am going through the orchard for my bath. Or the voice like a chatai. I don't know what is the word for chatai in Malayalam. Woven of leaves. Or like the voice, like the sound that's made when a palm tree is cleaved through the middle. It is like that. These are some of the racy images that have remained stuck in my memory. His most famous poem, that is the history of the 20th century, that has often been compared with the Wasteland, T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. It is summing up of man's struggles, aspirations, hopes, and despair in the 20th century. Now, here, I, for one, notice a new element in Akkitam's poetry. That his poetry is a garland of ideas, ideas in translation. There are very striking ideas, and these ideas are sustained by the rhythm of the verses, at times by the racy imageage. And this is how this almost 800-line long poem stands on its own. There are details and details piled up together, but the poem never collapses. It was a very difficult craftsmanship, and it is full of vivid imagery. Akkitam writes in one of his essays that for a poet, the basic thing is image. In the Hindi translation done by R. Asuji, the line is like this: एक कवि के लिए बिंब ही आराधना है. For a poet, an image is aradhana. That is what you aspire towards, what you actually worship. And to get the right image, ideas are there. But poetry is not written with ideas. Poetry is written with words, as Mallarmé said to his painter friend. Akkitam knows this, and so for him, the basic thing is image. And through imagery, he goes into different areas. All the time he is searching for the right image. This long poem is again a string of images. And when towards the end he says that, dear child, for us, darkness is more pleasurable than light. It's not the note of despair exactly. It's an acceptance of the world as it is today, as it was at the time, and regretfully, it is the same even today. It is full of violence, full of hatred. Everywhere there is violence and bloodshed. Sometimes in the name of religion itself, or in the name of big values. This whole poem is a damning critique of this violence in the name of values, in the name of ideology, in the name of politics. He quotes at one place in one of his essays his English teacher, no, not his English teacher, his guru, Itashari. He quotes him and says that an idea is useful only till it throws light around. An idea is dead the moment it stops shedding light on the world around. He is echoing his guru, Itashari's great poet, is almost echoing Buddha, who said, well, by the way, in one of his essays, he mentions that Buddha also is present in him because of his compassion for the downtrodden for the poor people, for all the suffering people, a Buddha is present within him. So his Guru Itashari is almost echoing Buddha when he says this. This is what Buddha said. I use ideas or ideology or a philosophy not to carry on my shoulder. I use it in order to cross the river of life. So it is crossing the river of sufferings to bring about a change in the society. This is what all the ideas are used. And as his Guru says, an idea loses its value the moment it stops shedding light around. This is the second thing that I have felt while reading Akkitam, that he is a thinking poet. He thinks and he translates his thoughts into images. Now, I have just used the word compassion. The word that he uses, perhaps in Malayalam too, it must be the same word, karuna. It's a very old word. It is in the Vedic tradition and also in the Buddhist tradition, karuna. Compassion is the word. Without compassion, this world cannot stay in its place. It is this compassion that sustains this universe. This is his basic idea. Love is important. And repeatedly, he goes back to this theme, the theme of love. And he offers a critique of all those ideologies that practice hatred and violence. And he is a deeply religious poet. Sometimes we find that in our country as well, religion has become a plaything, and it's a tool for killing people, as it's happening in Gaza. And we all are mute witness to that. Now here, Akkitam is very, very relevant. It is love. It is compassion. This is what Vallathol also said. Vallathol, perhaps the only poet who has written about so many things. His poetry is teeming with life. And he just celebrates life in all its varied colors and hues. So Akkitam also says that love and compassion is the basic thing. Next thing that I find is that Akkitam is deeply rooted in the scriptures and the Indian, Vedic and religious tradition. While reading some of his poems, I was at a loss how to formulate my response to that poem. For example, there is a very intriguing poem about a Red Indian. While he was in the USA and Canada, he met someone and he writes about that experience of a Red Indian asking him, you look like a Hindu. Yes, because of so many external things, one may look like a Hindu. But then he adds a line, And I was a bit surprised. He says, today in India, nobody says I am a Hindu. But this is just a passing moment in his poetry. He is never conscious of his separation from others. He is one of those great poets who have empathy towards the others. And in his poetry, the bridge between I and the other is very strong. At one place, he quotes the Vedas. He says, and again I was surprised because never before had I come across this quotation. There are two quotations from the Vedas, and I am using only my memory, and my memory is not as strong as Akkitam's. It may fail. There are two quotations. At one place he says that, there are so many, but I will here be using just two. At one place he says that it is never I in the Vedas. The Vedas always use we. Now this is something nobody had ever told me before. I know a bit of Sanskrit, but not much. And the Vedic Sanskrit certainly is very different and difficult. But no bhashya, no interpretations had ever before, to my knowledge, and my knowledge is limited, had ever said this, that it's not I, it's always we in the Vedas. At one place, he is using a very critical piece from the Vedas. The Vedas say, all are equal, sama, samana. And it is this equality that is important. Whenever this equality is broken, and there are classes, there are very rich people, there are very poor people, there are communities based on hatred, caste, casteism, untouchability, man hating man for ideological reasons. Akkitam writes against this. And it is that has appealed to me. I have talked a little about his racy imageage and Vedic imageage. In this context, I would like to add that Akkitam has written some wonderful poetry of narration. His narratives are great. He takes up a story, he takes up a fragment of a tale from somewhere and changes it into great poetry. You might recall his famous poem on Tulasi, where Tulasi is deceived, cheated by Vishnu. And Tulasi is changed into a river of tears. It's the same Tulasi, it's the same leaf of Tulasi that we use, and it's so holy. Why it's holy? Because of the tears. Because Tulasi changed his persona, his body, into tears. As many critics have pointed out, Akkitam is a poet of water. Akkitam is a poet of tears. There is no fire, Agni, in him. It's Apa, Jala. And he is a poet of Jala. And tear is the quintessence of water. All water is condensed into a drop of tear. You cannot shed a tear unless you love. It's only love that evokes a tear in you. And Akitam is a poet of tears. He is a poet of water. Akitam says at one place, in this big cosmos, there are suns, there are moons, there is a whole galaxy. But why is it that there is life only on this earth? This lowly earth, it's nothing in comparison to the sun. But life exists only on the earth. And on the earth, what is the most precious thing? It's upper water. And which water is the most important water? It's tears. That is compassion and love. Now, this is how he links himself to the great tradition of Indian poetry, beginning with Valmiki, with that Anushtup, and the Mahabharata, and the Ramayana, and Srimad Bhagavat. And this is how Akitam's poetry becomes a concrete whole in the 20th century. It's a summing up of the entire Indian tradition. Then a little about some of his poems that are very, very offbeat and intriguing. I will mention 2 or 3 poems. The first poem is about a Dalit. He is a landless laborer. He tills the land of his landlord, but he doesn't get enough to sustain himself and his family. His daughter is very, very ill, and he needs some money and food. He goes to the landlord, begs for food, but he is dismissed. And then he comes and rebels against the landlord. Then the landlord calls the police, and the police opens fire, and that man gets killed. I forget the name of the hero, Okuru or something like that. Now this is a great poem, and it shows Akitam in a different light. There is another poem about a poor Brahmin boy. He goes out in search of livelihood and is humiliated. This again is a wonderful poem. And as critics have pointed out, for Akitam, there is no difference between one human being and another human being. Whoever is suffering is suffering, and Akitam is all sympathy for him or her. This is Akitam's poetry basic strength. He does not discriminate between human beings. One may be deeply religious. All our great poets, not only in India, everywhere in the world, including Dante, they all were deeply religious. But religion is one thing, and poetry is something different. In poetry, you are a poet for all, for the whole of mankind. Otherwise, you are not a poet at all. And there is one poem that I don't know how to explain, and still this has always disturbed me. The title of the poem is, in Hindi translation, it is Desha Sevika. Arsuji is here, he will tell you the Malayalam title. It's about a lady who fights for the freedom of the land. He loves a fellow fighter. She loves a fellow fighter. And this young man, the man she loves, gets killed by a soldier. And of course, the soldier is on the side of the rulers. And she is very, very shattered. Now, after some years, the same soldier wins her heart. She falls in love with that soldier. And after a brief gap, this soldier is killed by the freedom fighters. And again, she is left without love and without a lover. How to reconcile these two responses together? What does Akkitam really wish to say? Now again, it's love. There is a very famous short story by Chekhov, the Russian short story writer and playwright. The name of the story is A Doll. The way she keeps switching her love loyalty from one to the other person. But this poem goes beyond that. Where to go then? What is the option? What is the ultimate shelter or refuge? Is this world full of mutual hatred and violence where no love is possible? These are the questions that Akkitam raises. Then there is another thing that struck me while reading his poems, that Akkitam, while writing poetry, all the time he is thinking about poetry and the role of a poet. This is something peculiar to the 20th century. Almost all the major 20th century poets in every language, including English and French and Russian, and of course the Indian poets included, they all have been talking about poetry and poet also while writing poetry. And Akkitam has written a large number of poems about poetry and the role of a poet. I will offer just one or two references. There is a poem, and it's about something one may call Midas touch. Whatever he touches changes into gold. He has got that touch. Parasmani, like Vallatul's poetry, has been like an amala, gooseberry on my palm. It looks so small on the palm. I can look around all the facets. Avala or gooseberry has so many facets. I can look around all of them. But when I begin to bite it, I find I cannot bite. It is very, very tough. and very, very strong as a fruit. Akitan's poetry is that amala, that gooseberry that I can hold in my palm, but I know that neither can I fully appreciate it, nor can I bite it off with my weak teeth. Thank you very much. Thank you all.